as most of y'all already know, the theme this year is medical liberty and patient autonomy. As we've already discussed, there are entities out there in the market that see the patient simply as a financial pawn, really nothing more than a means to an end, simply a cog in a large, complex, yet very broken machine. Present company excluded, of course, because we here at the FMMA are rebelling and winning against this machine. To illustrate this fight for liberty and autonomy, I'd like to begin by telling you all a story. Actually, two stories. And these two stories are very different from one another in setting and topic, yet they are eerily similar. The first is illustrative of the problem that we're all working very hard to change in healthcare, the ongoing dehumanization of patients and the fleecing of our collective pocketbooks. You might find my second story to be a little surprising and ironic, yet it's indicative of what happens when the buyer abdicates their role in a transaction to opportunistic third parties, regardless of industry. When you take the two together, they illustrate a consistent and highly predictable outcome that we as a society have let happen right before our eyes. So back in September of last year, my daughter needed a neurology consult for a minor yet very persistent symptom. This would be her first appointment at a big hospital system, and the fact that our family had always been on a reference-based pricing type of program, health plan, without the inferred security of a preferred provider organization, she asked if I would accompany her to her consult. I said, honey, I'd be more than happy to. Now, Dad can be a bit prickly when interacting with the medical community, like I'm sure some of you all can as well, especially if I perceive that myself or one of my loved ones is being taken advantage of or otherwise not being treated as the valuable customer that they are. I guess my daughter felt that that was a risk that she was willing to take for my company. So we showed up at the appointment and we were greeted by a big sign on the door of the big hospital that read, "Everyone entering this facility must wear a mask at all times." They even supplied free masks right inside the door. Well, I wanted to prove to my daughter that her decision to bring me along was going to be just fine, so I complied and masked up. As we approached the front desk, we noticed that the intake clerk had her mask riding right on her top lip, under her nose. I asked, is that the proper way to wear our masks here at Hospital System X? She said, no, but her mask it keeps sliding down on her. I said, yeah, I hate it when that happens. She then asked my daughter for her driver's license and her insurance card. My daughter provided her license, and then I told the lady that we would most likely be paying cash for this visit. And we're price sensitive and we're fairly knowledgeable about costs and that we'd like to inquire about the anticipated cost of this consult. She said, well, I don't know anything about that, but I still need to see your insurance card. I told her, well, I'm not going to provide my insurance card because, like I said, we're likely to be paying cash for this visit today. She once again insisted that before we can proceed, we must provide her our insurance card. I said, we're not going to do that. And she said, well, sir, you need to understand that it's actually against the law if you do not provide me with your insurance card. At this point, I could almost hear my daughter's thoughts. She said, I know she was thinking, oh no, here it comes. I said, ma'am, our insurance is our business, not yours. And it's also a product that we buy, and we use it when and if we choose to. We also have iPhones in our pockets, another product that we've purchased, and we're choosing not to use either one of those products at this time. iPhones and insurance cards are staying in our pockets. I'm afraid you're stuck with just dealing with the two of us. My daughter is a potential buyer of your services. She's your patient, and also a potential customer who is inquiring about the cost of your services prior to receiving them. Who in this office is equipped to have this conversation if it's not you? By now, the other office staff members behind the desk were beginning to take notice. By the way, none of them were wearing a mask, improperly or not. Shortly, another lady came forward and finally acknowledged what we had been talking about and said that she could help. We said, "That's wonderful, thank you. What's the anticipated cash price of this consult?" She said, "There is no way that we would be able to tell you the price of this consult until the doctor completes the chart." I said, "Okay, I understand, but we're not agreeing on a price until I get to review the charges." She said she understood and that she would notate that condition in our account. We then made our way to the waiting room and sat down. The waiting room was full of other patients, all dutifully wearing masks, and all of them were staring right at my daughter and I. What became immediately clear to us was that we were not seen as the courageous, educated, empowered consumer patients that I was so proud of portraying to the office staff and to my daughter. No, we were seen as non-conforming deviants that the other patients wished would have just stayed compliant and in line with how things are done. It was a look of contempt. That's when it hit me. That intake clerk didn't see us as customers, valuable or not, nor did the other patients. In fact, we were seen as simply not having standing to question the procedural status quo of the front desk, let alone discuss pricing. We were seen nothing more as a vehicle that delivers what is vital and important to her organization, our insurance card. For that facility, our insurance card was our identity. It would determine what treatment was going to be available to my daughter during that encounter, because without that prerequisite, our presence there was incongruous. How would they know what was covered? How would they know how much care could be performed? How much would they be able to bill? And ultimately, how much would they get paid? The antisocial offense that we had committed was simply asserting the fact that we are valuable customers, human beings, patients, and more importantly, we were potential buyers that had options, that we would either choose to patronize their business or not, based upon the proposed cost, anticipated outcome, and the overall customer experience. Now, I know that the language that I'm using to describe this encounter might seem out of place or out of context in the medical care, but that's the problem. In total, this experience was very disturbing to my daughter and I. It was actually dehumanizing and left us feeling very aware of the perilous state of the individual in American healthcare at this time. I leaned over to my daughter and mentioned how bizarre this experience was. Not how we were being treated by the business office necessarily, but how the other patients in the waiting room were reacting to us. We were looked at like social deviants because we didn't do what the status quo had anticipated, or as what we call it here at the FMMA, the cartel. Many of us here at the FMMA, Keith and I included, have said many times that healthcare is out of step with all other industries when it comes to consumerism and market forces. However, my second story leads me to believe that this phenomenon may be spreading if we continue to let it as consumers. Now, you're going to think that my family has bad luck all the time, but it just kind of worked out this way. So my son's vehicle recently became a victim of an errant golf cart owned by his apartment complex and operated at the time by an employee of said complex. Luckily, no one was injured, but my son's Subaru had received some real damage to its front bumper and lower fascia. After contact information had been exchanged, my son called me to ask, "Dad, how should I work on getting my car repaired? What should I do?" After we looked at the damage together, we decided that it would be worth a try to keep the insurance companies out of this and talk with the apartment complex management. He did that, and the apartment management agreed that if he would get 3 estimates to repair his car, they offered to pay the average of the 3 estimates to him in cash. He discussed this with Dad, and we both agreed that letting the apartment self-insure the repair of his vehicle would be beneficial to all parties. As my son started seeking 3 independent bids to repair his vehicle, he quickly discovered that not using insurance was going to be a problem. He went to 4 shops. Remember, he's trying to get 3 bids. He went to 4 shops for bids, and he found that only 2 of them told him that they do not allow self-pay customers. They wouldn't even give him an estimate. He was finally able to talk one of the shops into making an exception and giving him a bid. So now he was armed with 3 bids, 2 bids from shops that routinely accept self-pay, and 1 bid from a shop that reluctantly agreed to give a lowly car owner a bid to repair their vehicle. The shocking revelation to this was that the 2 self-pay shops' bids were very close in price to one another, and both appeared to have done a very detailed evaluation of the damage and what it would take to repair the vehicle. Both even included the recalibration of the front camera and cruise control system, which was shockingly actually a big part of the repair. The one shop, though, that usually doesn't take self-pay customers had a bid that was less than half the price of the other shops. And after careful review of the description of the damage and what they felt the repair required, we noticed there were large gaps in their description of the anticipated repair. Well, this was not going to work for us because as their bid was half the price, it would have significantly reduced our average cost agreement with the apartment complex. So my son and I, we called that shop together, and I asked about the large differences in their bid versus their cash-friendly competitors. They told us that their bid was only preliminary, and it won't include what the car really needs to be repaired, as they won't know for sure until they get the car in and disassemble it. I said, "Wow, you don't happen to have a background in healthcare, do you?" She said, "No, why do you ask?" I told her, "Well, since your bid is largely incomplete, it won't be comparable with your competitors." She then told us, "Sir, you have to realize that modern vehicles contain over 300,000 parts and are very complex. There is no way we can give you an accurate estimate until you bring the car in and we start disassembly." I told her your competition, 2 of them, didn't seem to have any issues with the complexity or the uncertainty of when bidding on what the vehicle needed. Her final comment to us was, "Well, we generally work with insurance, and they allow us to submit supplemental claims if the vehicle needs more than what we initially put on the bid." The similarities between the world of healthcare and apparently now the vehicle body shop industry was striking. What was the common thread of both of those stories? The presence of a perceived third-party buyer. Now, I don't have any issues with sharing risk. In fact, I believe that as Americans, we should be free to pool our resources, our individual resources, in the best and most effective ways possible to backstop catastrophic and unpredictable risk. My business as a third-party administrator is helping employers who choose to be that pooling vehicle help their employees and dependents use those pooled resources as efficiently as possible. We count on patients to be the best buyer that they can be. The presence of insurance or other risk-sharing entities should only be incidental to the relationship and the transaction between the buyer and the seller. When things start to go off the rails is when you take the buyer, in healthcare, that's the patient, out of the decision-making process. If you aren't seen as the buyer, you aren't seen as a customer. And if patients aren't seen as the customer, then you don't have standing to question the product you're receiving or the price that's being charged for it. No, those questions will be answered by somebody else, someone that most likely has other goals and objectives for that transaction. Now imagine that someone is an insurance company, or how about a hospital administrative bureaucrat, or maybe a governmental bureaucrat in charge of population health management. How do we think the individual patient or customer would fare in those circumstances? We already know the answer to that question. As I mentioned in the beginning, the Free Market Medical Association is the antidote for this poison. Each and every one of you is part of a growing rebel alliance. We will not win this fight for individual liberty in healthcare if we don't focus on the individual. Healthcare isn't about the management of a population within the confines of an insurance company's policyholders, nor is it the management of a population within the confines of an integrated health system. It must be about supporting the patient to help them reclaim their role, their autonomy, their liberty, and their individuality. Thank you.